Welcome to a Spiritual World podcast, a space where we explore the vastness within and around us, a place to remember that you are a spiritual world within a spiritual world, the mind within the mind of the all. Here, we journey beyond programming, past the pain, and into the true essence of our sovereignty. My name is Toriea, and my sole mission is for you to find the guru within and remember yourself as the creatrix of your world, embodying the power within you to build a life you love. As always, you're encouraged to go back to episode 1 for the full disclaimers on the terminology of mystic psychology. I am not a medical professional, and nothing shared in this podcast is intended to replace professional medical or mental health care. The term mystic psychology is not used in a clinical or medical context and has no connection to the medical field or industry. It is a spiritual and energetic framework rooted in the ancient wisdom and sciences of Hermeticism, intended to support self-exploration and inner awakening. If you are seeking medical advice, diagnoses, or treatment, please consult a licensed medical or mental health professional. Everything shared here is based on my own personal lived experiences and energetic perspectives, offered in the spirit of empowerment and remembrance. Please take what you need and leave the rest. I am honored to walk beside you as a channel, a guide, and a fellow traveler as we continue on this path together. Welcome to a Spiritual World podcast. I'm Toriea, and welcome in to the first episode in our Season 2 journey. Beyond the Veil, Dissecting and Corresponding the Mantis and Hermetic Frequencies. The first episode of a somewhat mini-series within the season all about understanding how major players, and by major players I mean frequencies, correspond, collide, and connect in the overarching current of ascension and where we are headed. In this first episode, we're journeying through the Hermetic Principles, not just as static teachings, as living codes. And we're exploring how those codes echo across and within the Mantis frequency. We begin with the Watchers, the Mantis beings, those often quiet, observant, interdimensional guides, have been walking beside us longer than we remember. And their frequency holds a mirror to Hermetic wisdom in ways that are both subtle and exact. This episode is not a lesson. It's a deep remembering. Not of something new, of something you already carry encoded within you. Both the Mantis frequency and the Hermetic Principles exist not as fixed frameworks, as active frequencies. And those frequencies are not the whole current. They are streams within it. Just like a soul is to an oversoul, these frequencies are intelligences within a greater unified field of remembering. That field is what I call the current. And everything I share in this series comes from listening to that current, where different streams meet, harmonize, or even contradict, only to reveal a deeper truth underneath. So, let's begin. We're going to start with the law of cause and effect. And these are not in order as per 1 through 7 of the principles of Hermetics, just because that's not how this was written, and that's okay. So, you've probably heard that the Mantis are watchers, and that's exactly what they are. Not in a distant or cold way, in a deeply present, highly attuned way. They are, in a sense, overseers, or in contrast, they are an oversoul guiding or even interfering when alignment calls for it. And they observe timelines. They observe your fields. They observe the subtle movements within consciousness itself and how everything constructs and operates together in its seamless web of consciousness. Their transmissions rarely come through language. And when they do speak, it's often telepathic. Maybe packets of geometry, clarity, or just this knowing. Mostly, they teach through silence, through witnessing. And Hermetics teaches something similar through the law of cause and effect, that every action has a reaction, every ripple a source. And in order to understand the pattern, you have to stop reacting to it. The Mantis hold a frequency of divine neutrality, a compassionate detachment, much like the archangels. They don't rush to fix anything. They only move when alignment is present. They are really, really maybe I see them as who I anchor that frequency in from, right? Because we all know presence is really key to where we're moving forward towards and what we want to embody. And I think that with them being in such higher dimensions that, they are allowing that to be possible for us. So when you begin to observe your own life with this same energy, without immediately judging or analyzing or rushing in to fix, you activate your inner observer. That's the first step toward Hermetic embodiment. And of course, all steps can be done in a magnitude and infinite order of ways. Nothing is finite. And so when I say first step, it's just the first one we're talking about today. So, not forcing change, but seeing clearly enough that change becomes inevitable. Observing cause and effect isn't just a Hermetic concept. It's a spiritual skill that rewires your entire relationship to life. When you begin to see every outcome as connected to a root, when you start witnessing behavior, reaction, emotion, and timing as part of a larger rhythm, you stop personalizing everything. You stop trying to fix everything, and you start understanding it. This is what it means to activate the observer within. It's not detachment in the numbed out sense. It's compassionate distance. It's the ability to say, this is happening. Let me witness it before I interfere with it. And this is really pivotal when you're, we're not really, in my understanding, I'm not trying to work on other people. I'm trying to only work on myself. And that is where this becomes pivotal, is to witness the experiences that we're being involved in and that we choose to participate and that we create around us before actually interfering with them and trying to fix, manage, or control them. So why is this so pivotal? Because without the observer perspective, you're always entangled, reacting from a wound or trying to control an outcome, repeating patterns without seeing the thread that runs through them. So when you step back, even just a breath's width at a time, you create space for new insight to arise. And you begin to start asking questions like, what is the root of this experience? What was the initiating thought, belief, or fear that created this experience? What did I expect to happen? And how did that expectation shape the result? And when you get even deeper into it, you also understand how your fears, beliefs, and thoughts actually contoured or dismembered or went against your expectations, and all of it kind of being confunneled all the way back down into the root, right? And this is how you exit survival mind and enter creator mind. The Mantis frequency teaches this through pure energetic presence. They observe everything, your field, your emotions, your patterns, without judgment, without rush. They remind you that observation is intervention when it's clean. And Hermetics teaches that you cannot change the effect until you understand the cause. So when you practice the observer perspective, you're not bypassing. You're accessing the control panel behind the experience. And that's one of the layers where true transformation begins. So, on to what the actual first Hermetic principle is, which is all is mind, the universe is mental. What does this mean? It means everything you perceive, everything you interact with is made of thought, vibration, and consciousness. And vibration is a principle all on its own that we will get to down the road. So, this isn't something you need to chase or decode. It's something that you already are at the core of your existence, right? Consciousness, mentalism, the quantum thought transmission. You don't need to find the universal mind. You are the universal mind, localized for a while in this human form. This is where the Mantis frequency also comes in. The Mantis don't speak in human words, and they rarely show up in ways that validate logic. They communicate through pure mental resonance, through thought packets, frequency codes, inner stillness, and often just bold sounding clarity. A sudden knowing, a felt shift, like when you walk into a room and you just know something shifted, or when a decision lands in your gut and body before the words ever reach your mind. They don't teach you what to think. They refine how you feel thought. And that's the key. Because just like you don't have to remember your name every time you say it, you don't have to search for your deepest knowing. It's already there, inside the current. The challenge is that your inner communication might not sound like language. It might not even come through as words at all. For some, it's a flash of geometry. For others, it's a full body yes, a gut pull, a still point between thoughts that pulses like a heartbeat. So how do you harness this? How do you know it's real? Well, start here. Recall a moment when you knew something before you knew it. When your mind hadn't caught up to your body, but your body was already moving. When a truth lived in your cells long before it arrived in your vocabulary. That's the same current. That's mentalism embodied. That's how the Mantis communicate with clarity that doesn't need to explain itself. And apparently there's definitely some energy loving this podcast episode because a stack that has been stable for weeks at this point just decided to dump over. So that was that background noise. So that's the same current. That's mentalism embodied, and that's how the Mantis communicate with clarity that doesn't need to explain itself. And you have this too. You are this. So instead of asking what the universe is trying to say, try asking what your mind has already heard and what you're finally ready to remember. And be reminded that silence is not empty. It's where creation begins. The stillness between thoughts. That's your tuning fork. You don't need to master your thoughts by controlling them. You master them by listening to what's underneath, layer by layer, by recognizing thought as architecture, thought as builder, and ultimately, thought as the very fabric of your reality, right? How we just talked about going from the tippy top all the way down to the root and everything in between. This is mentalism in action. And the Mantis don't just understand it, they are it. They understand it so deeply. They embody it, they transmit, they guide us to where we can remember how to do it in a natural stance points within our mind, right? This is alchemy, mental alchemy. So, what about polarity, right? Polarity is a principle in Hermetics. So how does that entangle with the Mantis frequency? Because as humans, we tend to split everything into categories, right? Polarity for us is light or dark, good or bad, right or wrong, love and hate. Hermetics tells us this is an illusion because opposites are really just extremes of the same thing. The law of polarity teaches us to look beyond the surface tension between dualities. In the Mantis, they don't erase polarity by any means. They integrate it. They show you how pain and peace can exist in the same breath, how you can laugh and cry at the same time, and not happy tears, sad tears. You can be laughing enjoyably and crying in pain at the same time. How chaos and peace can both hold the same rhythms at the same time. And how something can be both unknown and familiar at the very same time. If polarity is a sword, the Mantis turn it into a tuning fork, or even the caduceus. And through their frequency, you remember. You are not here to eliminate contrast. You are here to unify it. Then there's an even deeper layer of unveiling. The Mantis don't just show you how pain and peace can exist in the same breath. They remind you that they are the same breath. Not two currents running side by side. One inhale, one exhale. One wave of consciousness expressing itself in two sensations. Pain and peace aren't opposites. They are degrees of awareness within the same pulse. And when you stop resisting one and chasing the other, you begin to feel the full breath of being. The breath that holds it all without separation, without judgment. That's the kind of remembering the Mantis bring. Not to choose one over the other, to unify them inside your psyche, to become the breath that knows how to hold both. The Hermetic Principle of polarity teaches us that what we often call opposites, love and hate, greed and poverty, confidence and insecurity, are not truly separate. They are not endpoints on a line. They are expressions within a circle, a single energetic field cycling through itself. Love and hate, they're not opposites in opposition. They are the same current, spiraling through different degrees of openness or protection. What about greed and poverty? Not two different conditions, a shared wound. One grasps, the other fears there will never be enough. Same energy, just flipped. Confidence and insecurity, not rivals, they're mirrors. Reflections of how deeply we recognize our worth in any given moment. This is what mental and emotional alchemy actually is. Not learning how to fix what's wrong. Instead, recognizing that everything already belongs and how to use that in an alchemical standpoint. True healing isn't about erasing the parts of us we've labeled as shadow, scarcity, or shame. It's about understanding that these emotional extremes are not enemies. They are vibrations, coded aspects of the same whole, waiting to be reconciled and reintegrated. And this is where the Mantis frequency becomes a profound ally. They don't erase your extremes. They don't label your feelings as high or low. They show you the geometry of your own emotional field, the sacred spiral you're already living inside. They reveal how all of your inner polarities come from the same breath, not coexisting breaths. One breath, one current, one consciousness folding in on itself. When you feel this, not just in your mind, but in your body, something shifts. Polarity softens. The internal war quiets. You stop fearing your own complexity because you realize you are not fragmented. You are full. You become the observer, the bridge, the alchemist. You don't choose between sides anymore. You become the circle that contains them all. And this is where real transformation begins. Not by choosing one pole over another, by remembering that you were never divided to begin with. So we've talked a lot about vibration, and that's what we're going to pull in next, right? The Hermetic principle of vibration. Hermetics teaches that everything vibrates. Nothing is truly still. And your thoughts, emotions, your physical body, it's all vibration, it's all frequency. The Mantis feel your field with incredible precision. They don't just send love or healing in a broad sense. They fine tune it, like adjusting the strings of an instrument. And they don't do it for you. They help you remember how to do it yourself. They help you to harness vibration in its purest essence. When your timeline feels out of sync, when your nervous system starts to regulate after a massive shift, when a moment of silence cracks open an entire new level of awareness, that's the Mantis at work. That is the alchemical foundation of Hermeticism, transmuting one frequency into another with conscious intent. At its core, Hermeticism is alchemy, not just the symbolic turning of lead into gold. However, that is exactly what it is, right? Like all the weight, all the density within us, turning that lead into gold. But the real lived process of transmuting pain into wisdom, distortion into clarity, and fragmentation into wholeness is also what alchemy is all about. Hermetic alchemy doesn't require perfection. It requires conscious intent, the willingness to see what is and choose to move it toward truth. If it required perfection, we probably wouldn't have spirals within the spirals within the spirals within the spirals. We probably have one finite spiral and you had to get it perfect every single time, and that would just be difficult. I'm sure there's a universe like that, but thankfully it's not ours, right? At least not this one. Anyways, the Hermetic principle of vibration teaches us that nothing rests and everything moves. Everything is frequency, every emotion, every thought, every sensation in your body. It all vibrates. And in this way, nothing is ever truly stuck. I'm not a big fan of people saying like that you're stuck, you're blocked. You know what I mean? We're doing that stuff to ourselves. It's not that someone outside of us can do those things to us. And I guess I'll just pair this with that. Like, I don't think that my chakras ever close or that they're ever stuck. Because I think if they did, like, ultimately I wouldn't exist. Because they're an energy field and a part of the sacred geometry that creates me into this physical being. And therefore, if there was like... But I also do understand, like, resetting them and maybe they go dormant for a little bit to be reborn. That's how I look at it, is like each of our chakras is like a phoenix at different times, because I know for a fact that my chakras can be wide open, and then I'm going to an appointment with a shaman and they're going to upgrade them. So I'm going to like dormatize them. And a lot of times the shaman or someone will use the language like, oh, they're stuck, they're not open, they're blocked. And I don't necessarily, I mean, I could definitely block myself. Don't get me wrong there. However, I think there's just this infinite way to look at it. So anyways, that's like a total rabbit hole. So sorry, not sorry though, because right, that gives us a lot to think about. So nothing is ever truly stuck, just cycling in a pattern that hasn't yet been consciously shifted, right? So that's really why that rabbit hole comes up now, is because we just haven't been able to consciously shift it yet. Maybe there's a little bit more layers to work on. Maybe it's a little bit more difficult. Maybe we keep going to the repeated pattern instead of becoming the observer, that kind of thing. So this is where alchemy begins, not with force, with that awareness, with a subtle tuning of energy from one state to another. The Mantis frequency echoes this principle perfectly. They don't heal through drama or disruption. They work with precision, resonance, and calibration, like fine-tuning the strings of an instrument or adjusting the harmonic tension in a web. They sense where a frequency is off and they hold the correction silently until you are ready to entrain to it. And I can 100% attest to this because for the whole however many years that I was in the psychological, mental, spiritual, and physical psychosis that I was in, it was the Mantis frequency that held the framework for me not to lose myself completely in it and not be able to come back, right? Psychosis is a terrifying thing that a lot of people in our modern day of age, we don't have explanations for it, and people get lost in it for lifetimes. And that could have been me on another timeline, or maybe it was, I don't know. Anyways, that is not me on this timeline because the Mantis held my framework, my everything that I am, for me to completely fall apart and then come back together. So, it really comes down to that if you're someone still living inside trauma, inside survival mode, if your body holds grief, your nervous system feels frayed, or your timeline keeps looping in pain, please hear this. The Mantis are not judging you for where you are. They are holding the architecture of your becoming. They don't rush. They don't override. They simply remain steady, vibrating the memory of your coherence until you can hear it again. This is the alchemical foundation of Hermetics. Not bypassing the mess, transmuting it. Not shaming the law or the low vibration, but shifting it through conscious refinement. So when everything feels like it's breaking, that's not the end. That's the sound of recalibration. That's the pattern surfacing so it can be reorganized. The Mantis don't interfere because they don't need to. They trust your system. They trust the design. And as you begin to remember that you are vibration, not just a victim of it, you awaken the alchemist within. Because transmutation doesn't always look like a miracle. Sometimes it looks like quiet shaking, a subtle release, or gentle reorientation back to your original frequency. And when that happens, the spiral completes itself. The circle closes, and what once felt fractured becomes whole again. Moving on. We hear the word alchemy and think of gold, turning lead into light, pain into power. In Hermetics, this process is called the great work. In Mantis frequency, it's simply called remembering. They see you as a living philosopher's stone, already encoded with everything that you'll ever need to evolve. Because to them, you're not becoming something new. You're returning to what you've always been beneath the distortion and the illusions. There's no ladder to climb, no finish line to cross. Their job is not to save you. It's to show you what's already inside of you, allowing you to save yourself. You'll know they're present not by what they say, but by the sudden urge to face what it is that you've been avoiding, to turn towards the shadow and dissolve all of the fear around you. They awaken the alchemist inside of you, the one who doesn't bypass the pain and instead transforms, transmutes, transcends it. Where Hermetics maps the path, the Mantis hold the original frequency of your essence, quietly guiding you back to it. They see your great work not as a heroic quest, as a natural, inevitable unraveling of what is not you. And so the alchemist and the rememberer are not separate roles. They're just two ways of walking home, and two always equaling the one. So, As above, so below. As within, so without. This is the most iconic Hermetic phrase. It speaks to reflection, to resonance, to the mirroring of worlds. The Mantis, they don't speak it. They embody it. The Mantis help you remember by working at the subtlest of roots. They might not change your outer world directly. However, they'll guide you to shift one internal thread. And that single recalibration will ripple outward, quietly reorganizing everything. Because when you change from within, when you complete that alchemy, that transmutation, that mental and that emotional and that spiritual remembering, the architecture around you responds. And that's not intervention, it's resonance. They might show you visions of planetary grids that match your own neural pathways. I had a client, it was so cool because she would get these, like, you know, when you get bumps, right? Like you get chills and you get bumps. She was getting them in a sense that they were only in certain shapes and like clusters on her arms and body. And when we were trying to identify it, it was almost as if some of those layouts were like of the pyramids or of, you know, grand architecture that was extremely activating that we know of today to still exist in the world. And some of them, I mean, we were never able to confirm or necessarily deny it. It felt symbolic in that regard. However, you know, so there are an infinite number of ways that they can show you these different ways. But right, like the planetary grids that match your own neural pathways, that's just as phenomenal. That's just as an amazing example. I wanted to give you a real life example though, that just popped into my mind that like I was able to witness that was phenomenal. And they might guide you to change something internal that shifts everything external, because that's really honestly the whole purpose of this path that we're walking is, like I said earlier, I'm not looking to focus or control or work on anybody else's path. If I work on mine, then everything externally will shift. All of my relationships, everything that I, you know, don't desire compared to what I do desire. So this is the whole goal of everything in existence at this time point, is the transmutation internally to shift the external. And they may help you heal your body, not just for your own sake, because your healing echoes through your bloodline, your community, and your planet. And them helping you heal your body is also a remembrance, whether it's Hermetics, Mantis, both combined, both, whatever, if you look at it separate. And I do, from my experience, I'm not saying that you can't go both ways, because I 100% believe that you can. However, for me, my coding seems to be that it starts internally. And when I shift what happens internally, then not only does it extend externally like we discussed, but like it also extends physically, right? Like I have literally healed my body from years and years and years of endometriosis, never being able to have a child, and polycystic ovarian syndrome, as well as IBS and some other diagnoses, physical, mental, psychological, completely like they don't exist anymore in my body. And that's because of the work that I've done internally as an alchemist. So they remind us that we are not isolated beings. And that, and when I say they, I mean Mantis and Hermetics. They both remind us that we are not isolated, right? We are nodes in a living, breathing network. We're going to come back to it. Are you guys ready? We are spiritual worlds inside of spiritual worlds as we process and as we reflect. So to heal yourself is to heal the field. To change your thoughts is to change the entire landscaping around you. This is principle. And the Mantis frequency enforces it without an overbearing enforcement. They still observe and overlook and guide. And they do enforce when it's in alignment. But it's not like the type of that I guess they kind of like police a little bit. You know, it's kind of that kind of concept, which is a good thing, right? Like, we need some high up dimensional beings to really be able to see what we can't see, because we are limited down here. We're growing our awareness and our remembrance. However, our bodies are in this lower density, so we only have the capacity for so much at this time, and that's going to continue growing as we raise the vibration of the planet and of ourselves as a society. So, the seventh Hermetic principle is gender, also meaning generational, a couple different ways to look at this, but it's definitely not as we would initially think or have been taught. It's not about a male-female identity. It's about creation. Gender in Hermetic terms is the universal polarity that brings all things into form. The masculine is the impulse, the directive, and the seed. The feminine is the space, the holding, the soil. And together, they generate reality, right? So, like, it's basically giving birth. The Mantis frequency honors this balance very, very deeply. They are neither masculine nor feminine, and yet they carry the memory of both. You may feel them enter like structure, firm, precise, intentional. Sorry, I lost my wording there for a second. Or you might feel them like fluidity, soft, receptive, dissolving. They don't ask you to choose a role. They remind you that you contain both, and that your healing, your voice, and your becoming is a generative act. To live aligned with the principle of gender is to honor your own creative rhythm, to feel when it's time to move and when it's time to receive. And just like the Mantis, to know that true creation doesn't need to shout. It only needs to remember the balance. So, as we slowly come to an end of this episode, there is no eighth principle. However, when it comes to Hermetics, Hermetic knowledge has always been very, very protected. Not because it's exclusive, because there's a certain level of earning through readiness. The Mantis work in a very similar way. They don't give answers, they open doorways. Their messages are encoded in symbols, silence, and sensation. And your ability to understand them depends entirely on your willingness to surrender the ego, listen deeply, and stay humble. They are not gatekeepers. They are guardians of energetic alignment. You receive what you are resonant with, not as a reward, as a reflection. You don't chase wisdom, you become it. And that's kind of the same with Hermetic knowledge, is when you do this work, you become the deep remembrance of it, right? Like, I didn't know that I was walking the Hermetic path when I was walking the Hermetic path. It was unveiled to me after I got through so much of the work and really, really experienced alchemy for a good period of time and harnessed it and utilized it for, you know, the rising of vibration. And, you know, Hermetics has always been really kept in the dark. Like, it's been shunned by the forces prior to what we're experiencing now. And that's because we had to go through those periods of darkness. They served us because, you know, what is buried must always come to the light. And light also wants to experience darkness. So we went through those periods. And now Hermetics is resurfacing along with so many other esoteric ancient wisdoms. And they're not going to be able to stay buried. They're just going to keep rising and keep unveiling themselves through new discoveries. But you got to think about it too. These new discoveries, right? They're not really new. They're just reminding us of where we have been and that we have forgotten about or don't have that conscious awareness knowledge, right? Like when we uncover new scrolls or new new historical sites. They've always been there. It's the same kind of concept. So, as we do prepare to close this first episode of Laws Beyond the Veil, we ask the question, is Hermetics a frequency or an architecture? And what about the Mantis? Because they really hold architecture. And the truth is, they're both. Hermetics is a frequency that organizes. It's not just spiritual theory. It's the vibrational structure behind reality, behind what we're seeing. Not a blueprint in the traditional sense. Instead, it's a living design language made of rhythm, polarity, mental intention, and transformation. It sings the universe into coherence with its hum and its and its ohms. And the Mantis, they don't teach that structure. They tune it. They calibrate the design through resonance, refining your field until the architecture becomes something you don't just study, you embody. But here's the deeper layer I do want to share with you. In my own life, it was Hermetics in tangent with a sacred alchemical process that introduced me to spiritual architecture and alchemical processes. And that sacred alchemical process was the 12 steps. That was the first architecture I ever walked with full intention, full surrender, and just turning myself over to my own self and initially not quite realizing it. And then I repeated it over and over again because the mental alchemy was undeniable. I mean, I did my first round in less than 6 months, and it was so transformational that I just kept doing them over and over again. And I had many, many layers to work through. So it really helped set me free from the psychosis. It really aided in that. It wasn't the only thing, because I have since recently uncovered that the psychosis set in with a lunar moon and was also relieved on a lunar moon, actually a lunar new year to new year. So that was very, very amazingly beautiful. So anyways, but in those 12 steps, the mental alchemy was undeniable, and it reflected out into my physical. I wasn't the only one that witnessed this. And the 12 principles, the 12 movements, a sacred map of surrender is what they became for me, of accountability, amends, spiritual awakening, just cleaning out my closet, like Eminem says, right? The Mantis frequency, I understand, stretches through to the 12th and even the 13th dimension, which only resonates deeper to the 12-step process that I walked and helped destroy myself and rebirth myself anew through. And by walking that structure to the best of my ability, something reawakened in me. And not just something, a magnitude of somethings over and over again. New remembering and understandings became conscious. The history of humanity and mythology and dragons and galactic federations and just so much, yet still so little, because it's so vast. I didn't just heal. I remembered. I rebirthed. That process of inner transformation, the turning of shadow into light, pain into power, that's alchemy. And I didn't learn it directly or only through esoteric studies. It was the 12 steps that brought me back to my remembrance of esoteric knowledge and unearthed it back into my conscious being. So I understood alchemy before I understood or before I remembered that esoteric knowledge existed. Right? Like, I guess, like you said, you could do it in any order, right? Like, it's infinite. So what I'm trying to say is, like, I didn't know about Hermetics before I knew about alchemy. I understood all about alchemy, and then when I was led to Hermetics to understand, that's how it kind of happened. I learned it by walking those 12 steps time and time again, by feeling my own energy change over and over again and being dedicated to that change, seeking that change, by becoming someone new from the inside out. And I kept doing this in new and other ways since those years ago and all of those rounds of steps ago, because there is no one way. and I am my own philosopher's stone. And that experience, that embodied transformation, is one of the magnitudes of layers that allowed me to recognize Hermetics when I met it and understand my embodiment as a Hermetic prophet. Because the inner alchemist had already been awakened. So now, when I feel into Hermetics, I feel home because I've lived its rhythm before in another architecture. And I also know that at this time, I am here to aid in downloading the Hermetic frequency back into the earth for it to be remembered and awakened through us all, along with the Mantis and many other cosmic beings aiding us at this time. Gratitude, deep, deep gratitude to every benevolent frequency aiding us. And I really don't like to disregard the ones that aren't or weren't benevolent, because there are many that are transforming and evolving, just like the pains and traumas have helped us get to where we are, and how they all do, right? Like, we're all on missions of evolution and expansion and growth. And I wish that to every being in the cosmos, every being in existence, because that's what I wish for. That's where that thought kind of ended. Because I was even thinking about reptilians. And, you know, I was watching a show, and how, you know, for a long time they were stuck in a specific density, the fourth dimension, and that there maybe has been some ill feelings towards humanity based off of it. And I don't know if this is exactly true or if it's not, right? Like, it's an infinite reality. I'm not sure what my timeline has settled on. However, I do know that I wish for them to be able to expand and evolve just as we have. And to understand that no one is first, last. You know, Bashar, there was something actually that came up in regards that's very similar. You know, Earth is like a middle planet, right? And even if it was like the larger planet, it would still be a middle planet on some grounds somewhere. So there's like really no first, last. It's always, we're always some level of in between, always expanding and evolving. And yeah, you know what I mean? So there's my squirreling and losing my place. So what I've come to understand is this. There are magnitudes of architectures living within other architectures, nested frequencies, and layered designs. And you might come to Hermetics through sacred geometry, or through science, or through addiction recovery, or through grief. It doesn't matter how you find it. It matters that when you feel it, you remember it. So, allow this to be your invitation to recognize the structures you've already walked, to see them not as separate, instead as sacred, as frequencies within that same current. And next week, we'll explore another great teaching in correspondence with the Mantis and Hermetic frequencies. And that great teaching will be the Law of One. So stay tuned. And until then, remember this. You're not just discovering architecture. You are architecture. And every structure you've moved through has been guiding you home to yourself. The current has always carried you. And now you get to swim with it on purpose. No longer fighting it, no longer resisting it, no longer getting stuck in the undertow where you can't breathe. So, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at A Spiritual World, and a bunch of new meditations coming out. Energy therapies are on hold until I finish the remaining attunements of my Light-Tarian Reiki, and I think that's about it right now, guys. Yeah, plethora of new meditations being launched every week, ranging from everything we talk about to more, and enjoy. I'd love to hear your feedback on this episode. I'd love to hear if there is a certain teaching that you would like for me to compare the Mantis and Hermetics to. I've got quite a few on the list, so I'm working my way through them. But they're also ones that I have personally experienced. So infinite reality, you know, send them over. I always love feedback and just connection. So enjoy, and until next time, namaste. and many blessings on your way.